You've got to switch it off.
This is your 1 minute call. Your 1 minute call. Good morning, members. Welcome to the Economy, Environment, Infrastructure Committee meeting on Tuesday, 20th of June at 10:30. Good morning, members, and welcome to this first meeting of the Economy, Environment, Infrastructure Committee following the local government election last month. I would particularly wish to welcome those elected members who are on the committee for the first time. Before we deal with the business before us this morning, I would wish to acknowledge the work of the previous committee chairman, Colin Smith. Colin was an effective chairman who always ensured he kept the business moving swiftly along, and I hope that I'll be able to do the same as well. It would also be important to acknowledge that Colin led the committee in key policy developments, including the Regional Economic Strategy, the Local Development Plan, the Tourism Strategy, and the Solway Local Flood Risk Management Plan. Obviously, as this is a strategic meeting, we will not be taking any operational award issues, as did Colin, and I would like to say at the start that Report 15, because of advice and emails that I have received, I am going to defer that until full council, which is the Whitesands project. Members with their IT equipment may not have been able to see some of the objections, and therefore I'm not going to take any questions or any comments on it. It's going to be deferred to full council, and that is it. If it's about that, I've said, Ian, I'm not going to take any comments or questions on this.
So only in regards to being able to get hard copies and accessing the objections, that's all. Clarity in regards to that. It's not a political point or a press statement.
Officers will help as much as possible for that side of things.
We do need that because of our information technology, how it's been working on that.
Officers will help you with that. Okay, move on to Sederunt and apologies.
Good morning, everyone. We have 20 members present. We are quoted, and I have an apology from Councillor Surtees.
Any other apologies? No, thank you. Declarations of interest. Anybody got any declarations of interest? No, thank you. Then move on to report number 3, then the Delegation to Economy, Environment, Infrastructure Committee. The purpose of this report is to provide information on the delegation to this committee as agreed by full council on the 23rd of May 2017. This is a procedural report for committee members, and the director will take any questions on the report. Members? Are we happy with the delegations then? We move to the recommendations, which is members are asked to note the remit of Economy, Environment, Infrastructure Committee as detailed at 3.2. Happy with that? Thank you. We'll move on to report 4 then, which is members' induction. This report presents us with proposals to develop an induction and orientation for members of this committee on the operations activity within EE&I Directorate. As members can see from the information included in the report, there are a wide range of teams and services for us to develop an understanding of. Officers are seeking our views on developing an induction programme that enables us to get to know and understand the different aspects of EE&I, and to do this in a way that helps us engage with staff at the different frontline services and gain a good understanding of their work and activities. The main considerations in developing the programme that supports us are outlined in paragraph 3.81.1 of the report. Can I therefore open the debate up to consider our requirements, unless there's anything you wish to add, Alistair, to
that? Nothing to add, Chair. Thank you.
Ian?
Just as per all the other service and corporate committees, that this same paper, I think, pretty much is come in front of. We would ask that the showing of flexibility around about a group and personal setting in order to bring on individual members at their own personal level and needs. Chairman.
There's 3 particular areas that I would like to sort of highlight, and maybe, Alistair, we can organise something for that. Obviously, there's the PFI waste contract. I think it's a very complicated contract, and every time there is a change in that, then we can, if there's an awareness session for members on the PFI side of things. The other one is, as members will be aware from, getting emails from their constituents, things like that. So how do we actually find out what we do about roads? How do we put the annual, delegation and where the different projects are going to be, and how does, if that changes throughout the year, how do you actually do that? So I think from a roads perspective, can we see how they plan the annual roads, and then if something is to change, if we get more money, for instance, and things like that, how does that affect that? And the last one is, which I'm sure will be coming up in an E&I report, not this particular day, but certainly in the future, is the Stranraer waterfront. I think it'd be ideal to have a sort of a two-pronged attack on this by saying, if we go and have a look at the Stranraer waterfront project, to actually see it rather as look at it in your mind's eye, can actually go out there and see what the issues are, but also in the same day perhaps do the recycling area on that for a visit for members. Is that okay, members? And of course we're open to any suggestions from anybody else who would like anything else. Tommy?
Could I first of all welcome, Chair, the visit you're going to have to Stranraer waterfront. I'll be welcomed. Because even living amongst it, I'm not even clear what's supposed to be happening. I'll be perfectly honest with you. So I do welcome that. But could yourself, Chair, or the Director give us an indication if we'll have this report before us in September on the waterfront?
Alistair?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it is our intention to bring forward a report on the waterfront in September.
Stephen?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it's just a couple of points within the papers. One's to do with, on page 13, you've got the current challenges within the Directorate. It's just a point on public consultation. I know we always continually seek to improve how we consult over projects, but I'm just wondering, is there any work being done to support officers of the Council in terms of maybe a national standard for consultation, or a sort of office at that sort of level which ensures and encourages people who are undertaking consultations to have the appropriate qualifications, for example? And the second question is really around buildings maintenance and building cleaning, and I think there's maybe an opportunity to help especially new members and existing members understand maybe the differences between what Communities Directorate is responsible for and what EEI is responsible for, because I think sometimes there's a wee bit of a misunderstanding as to who's meant to do what, so it helps us direct our inquiries a wee bit better and be more efficient.
Right, thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Thompson, for that input. Yes, there is training in place for consultation procedures, and members who have been returned will recall that in our project management programmes, best practice, we do have to produce a stakeholder plan, which is all about the communication aspects as well. So that's well covered in that area of project management as well. So there are courses and there are arrangements for the appropriate training. Yes, I think it's very important that members understand the difference between EEI and communities, and again we'll bring that through any orientation or briefings that come forward.
Graham?
Thank you, Chair. It's with regard to Stranraer waterfront. I also welcome a site visit on that. I was heavily involved in the bringing together of the original master plan back, it must be 8 or 9 years ago, and we're still looking at a fairly derelict site. And I understand, I wasn't there, but I understand that last week at area committee there were some speculative figures put into the public domain which were not able to be substantiated by the officer who was there. And I would quite like some more up-to-date and maybe more substantiated figures, if we could get them on that site visit. Or
there is a report coming to the September committee, and I think it's appropriate to go and visit the site, and we didn't want any sort of packets figures coming to these particular committees. We need to make decisions that are appropriate at the time.
Thank you, Chair. I totally agree with you, and presumably the site visit will be prior to the September EEI committee meeting.
We will try and organise that. Obviously it's a busy time and we have our recess, and some of us do need a good holiday every year. All right, but we'll try and get that in place before the September meeting. Okay. Anybody else? Can we go to the Michael? Richard, sorry. All right, sorry. Richard.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Just welcome to learn more about the waste management PFI contract. It seems pretty convoluted. Also, on the challenges, the introduction of curbside recycling collections in accordance with the Waste Scotland regulations. I think probably need a good update of what we've learned from the pilot in the West and what the options are for moving forward on that.
That was a report that was coming forward anyway in the future, Richard, but I think the visit to the recycling unit will give us that understanding as well, and I'll certainly ask officers to come forward with that. Alistair, are you happy with that?
Yes, it's our intention to bring forward a report to members round about the autumn time. September was the target, but I think it would be a special meeting of this committee because it is a complex issue. But it depends on our programme as we work through the summer as to the actual date of that. I would also intend to come round all the groups and take them through the process and where we are at the moment with the various negotiations that are taking place.
Okay, can we go to the recommendations then? Members are asked to consider the requirements in relation to developing their understanding of economy, environment, infrastructure activities, and I think we've done that and suggested a few. Agree that a programme of induction and orientation is developed with the elected members' agreement, reflecting their requirements and based on the considerations outlined at paragraph 3.81. We happy with that? Okay, thank you. Okay, report number 5 is the Economy, Environment, Infrastructure Committee appointments to outside bodies. This report seeks approval for appointments to outside bodies by the Economy, Environment and Infrastructure Committee, and we have been asked to determine appointments to outside bodies in relation to delegations of this committee. Before we move to determine our appointments, are there any questions on the report which the Director shall answer? Okay, Stephen.
It's not a question, but I'm assuming there's no questions, so if we're going to the nominations.
Yeah, if you want, I'll do it one by one through the recommendations, if that's okay. So the recommendations are members are asked to agree in 2.1 to appoint one member to the Biosphere Partnership Board as detailed in 3.6. Stephen?
Thanks, Chair. I'd like to nominate Councillor Hagman for the Biosphere Partnership.
Are there any others? Okay. So we appointed Councillor Hagman to that. 2.2 to appoint 3 members to the Corridor Regeneration Steering Group, being one member from each of the wards in Annandale South, Annandale East and Eskdale, and Annandale North as detailed in 3.7. Jim?
Chair, I'd like to nominate Councillor Brodie as one of the 3 members.
Malcolm?
I'd like to nominate Councillor Ian Crothers as one of the members.
Well, that's 2 for the South so far.
I'd like to nominate yourself as Chair of the Committee, but also Councillor Marshall.
Happy to second them.
Have we got anybody for the North?
I'd like to propose Stephen Thompson for the North.
Okay, so we've got the North and the East and Eskdale. We have 3 from...
Stephen, in case there's any confusion about who seconded it.
Thank you. Well, I don't think the North and the East and Eskdale one is the issue here, it's the South one. So we have a proposed and seconded from the South, Councillor Marshall. We have proposed Councillor Brodie and proposed Ian Crothers. We haven't got a seconder for any of them yet. No. Andrew?
I'll second Ian Crothers.
So is there any seconder for Councillor Brodie? So in which case we will have to go to a vote on the South member of the Corridor Regeneration, and that's proposed and seconded was Councillor Marshall, and proposed and seconded Councillor Crothers. Lucy, do you want to take us through?
And I have a motion and an amendment put forward. This is for the representative of the South for the Corridor Regeneration Steering Group. And the motion is by Councillor Marshall and seconded by Councillor Martin to propose Councillor Thompson. And the amendment...
No. Councillor Marshall is proposed by
Marshall.
Councillor Thompson.
Thompson. Marshall has been proposed by Councillor Thompson and this is seconded by Councillor Martin. And the amendment is Councillor Crothers has been put forward by Councillor Johnston and this has been seconded by Councillor Giusti. Councillor Dryborough.
Motion.
Councillor Wood. Councillor Brodie. Councillor Crothers.
Amendment.
Councillor Dempster.
Motion.
Councillor Fairbairn.
Amendment.
Councillor Gilroy.
Amendment.
Councillor Giusti.
Amendment.
Councillor Hagman.
Motion.
Councillor Inglis.
Amendment.
Councillor James.
Amendment.
Councillor Johnston.
Amendment.
Councillor Lever.
Motion.
Councillor Marshall.
Motion.
Councillor Martin.
Motion.
Councillor McComb.
Amendment.
Councillor Nicholl.
Amendment.
Councillor Sloan. Councillor Thompson.
Motion.
Councillor Young.
Motion.
And we have 10 votes each. Would the chairman like to cast the deciding vote?
I'll not change mine, it will be a motion.
And the motion carries with the chair using his casting vote. And Councillor Marshall will be the representative for the South.
Now you move on to 2.3 to appoint one member and one substitute to the Economic Leadership Group. Stephen.
Thanks again, Chair. I'd like to nominate yourself as the member and Councillor Wood as the substitute.
Happy to second.
Are there any others? No. Okay. 2.4 to appoint one member to the Galloway Glens Landscape Partnership. Ian.
I would move Councillor Gilroy.
Stephen.
I'd like to move Councillor Young.
Happy to second.
Happy to second Councillor Gilroy.
Okay, the motion is, this is for the member for the Galloway Glens Landscape Partnership. And I have a motion put forward by Councillor Crothers for Councillor Gilroy, and this was seconded by Councillor Johnston. And I have an amendment put forward by Councillor Thompson, and seconded by Councillor Martin.
Second.
And this is for Councillor Young, the representative.
Would that one not be the motion because it was seconded before the one with Councillor Cross?
I think you're correct.
Yeah,
You
that'll
are
be
correct
the
there,
motion
Lincoln.
for Councillor Young and the amendment for Councillor Gilroy.
Okay, Councillor Dryborough.
Motion.
Councillor Wood. Councillor Brodie. Councillor Crothers.
Amendment.
Councillor Dempster.
Motion.
Councillor Fairbairn.
Amendment.
Councillor Gilroy. Councillor Giusti.
Amendment.
Councillor Hagman.
Motion.
Councillor Inglis.
Amendment.
Councillor James.
Abstain.
Councillor Johnston.
Amendment.
Councillor Lever.
Motion.
Councillor Marshall.
Motion.
Councillor Martin,
Motion.
Councillor McComb,
Amendment.
Councillor Nicholl,
Amendment.
Councillor Sloan, Councillor Thompson,
Motion.
Councillor Young.
Motion.
And I can confirm that the motion carries, and that is that Councillor Young will be the representative.
Okay, thanks very much. Move on to 2.5 to appoint 2 members to the Industrial Communities Alliance as detailed in 3.10. Stephen.
Thanks, Chair. I'd like to nominate, well, there's 2 members, so Councillor Dempster and Councillor Wood.
Happy to second.
Okay, thank you. Any others? No. Councillor Dempster and Wood in there. Sorry. Councillor.
Chairman, he wouldn't have a slate by any chance, would he? We just vote on the slate and that would be it done? Or is it individual? Be quicker and easier, I think.
Okay, to appoint 2 members to Leader Strategic Management Group as detailed at 3.1. Stephen.
Kind of wishing we did have a slate, but we don't. I'd like to nominate yourself and the Chair and Vice Chair, basically. Thank you.
Happy to second.
That has been in the past. Any others? Thank you. To appoint 1 member to the Outdoor Access Forum as detailed at 3.12. Stephen.
Thanks again, Chair. I'd like to nominate Councillor Hagman.
Councillor
I'd like
Johnson.
to nominate Councillor Ingalls.
Happy to second Councillor Hagman.
You got a second there for?
Yep, that's myself, Chairman.
Okay, and we need, this is for 1 member of the to the Outdoor Access Forum, and the motion is put forward by Councillor Thompson and seconded by Councillor Marshall, opposing Councillor Hagman, and the amendment is proposed by Councillor Johnston, seconded by Councillor Crothers, and that's for Councillor Inglis. Councillor Dryborough.
Motion.
Councillor Wood.
Motion.
Councillor Brodie. Councillor Crothers.
Amendment.
Councillor Dempster.
Motion.
Councillor Fairbairn.
Amendment.
Councillor Gilroy.
Amendment.
Councillor Giusti.
Amendment.
Councillor Hagman.
Motion.
Councillor Inglis.
Amendment.
Councillor James.
Amendment.
Councillor Johnston.
Amendment.
Councillor Lever.
Motion.
Councillor Marshall. Councillor Martin.
Motion.
Councillor McComb.
Amendment.
Councillor Nicholl.
Amendment.
Councillor Sloan. Councillor Thompson.
Motion.
Councillor Young.
Motion.
And we have 10 votes for the motion and 10 for the amendment. The Chair would like to exercise your casting vote.
Motion.
And I can confirm that the motion carries and Councillor Hagman will be the representative of the Outdoor Access Forum.
2.8 to appoint 1 member to the Prestwick Airport Consultative Committee as detailed in 3.13. Stephen.
Thanks, Chair. I'd like to nominate Councillor Sloan.
Councillor Johnson.
I'd like to nominate Councillor Giusti.
Happy to second Councillor Sloan.
Whoa, wait a minute. John, you were before Ian. And put your hand up.
Happy to second Councillor.
Right, Ian. Right, okay. Shall we say 10-10 again? Will we?
Wish I had.
Chair, could I just say I'm happy to give way to Councillor Giusti.
Well, if you're happy to give way, you happy to take? Okay, it's Councillor Johnson, you happy? No, okay. It's a Councillor Johnson. Thanks very much for that, Tom. To appoint 1 member and 1 substitute to SAILSA, the Community Rail Partnership for Carrick and Wigtor, as detailed 3.14. Stephen.
Thanks again, Chair. I would like to nominate Councillor Sloan, should he wish to take it, as one of the members.
Councillor Marshall.
Happy to second.
Any others? Councillor Johnson.
I'd like to propose Councillor Giusti.
Any substitutes? Or would you prefer Councillor Sloan to take it and be a substitute? Would
Yeah, that's fine. That's
the member be happy with that, rather than to go to the vote? Okay, thank you. To appoint one member to the Scottish Council's Committee on Radioactive Substances. Stephen.
I'll happily nominate yourself, Chair.
Any others? Okay. Working at Chapel Trust for 27 years, I'm sure I've got a wee bit of an idea what to talk about now. 2.11 to appoint one member of the Solway Firth Partnership as detailed in 3.16. Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to nominate Councillor McClelland.
Happy to second.
Chair, just a question on that is, are the nominations for this, for the members of this committee?
Yeah, I'm saying that. Yeah. Yeah. It has to be E&I, I'm afraid.
Chair, no, I appreciate that. I think there was one or two in there where it didn't require to be a member of this committee, but I'll withdraw the nomination on that basis. Thanks.
So, do you have one? Do we have a member who's interested in the Solway Firth Partnership?
Chair, can I nominate Councillor Thompson for the post if he wishes to take it up?
Chairman, I would nominate Councillor Johnston as well.
Are you willing to take that, Stephen?
Chair, I'll happily give way to the other member.
Okay, so Councillor Johnston was, yeah. Okay, 2.12 to appoint one member of Southern Uplands Partnership as detailed in 3.17. Stephen.
Thanks again, Chair. I'd like to nominate Councillor Hagman.
Councillor Johnston.
I'd like to nominate Councillor Fairbairn.
I'll second Councillor Fairbairn.
Councillor Ingle, second. Councillor Fairbairn. Yeah.
I'll second Deck.
So the motion then is Fairbairn and the amendment is Councillor Hagman.
Okay, the motion for Councillor Fairbairn and the amendment is for Councillor Hagman. Councillor Dryborough?
Amendment.
Councillor Wood?
Amendment.
Councillor Brodie? Councillor Crothers?
Motion.
Councillor Dempster?
Amendment.
Councillor Fairbairn?
Motion.
Councillor Gilroy?
Motion.
Councillor Giusti?
Motion.
Councillor Hagman?
Amendment.
Councillor Inglis?
Motion.
Councillor James?
Motion.
Councillor Johnston?
Motion.
Councillor Lever?
Amendment.
Councillor Marshall?
Amendment.
Councillor Martin?
Amendment.
Councillor McComb?
Motion.
Councillor Nicholl?
Motion.
Councillor Sloan? Councillor Thompson?
Amendment.
Councillor Young?
Amendment.
Okay. And we have 10:10. Would the chair elect to exercise?
Amendment.
And confirm that the amendment then carries and Councillor Hagman has been proposed.
2.13 is to appoint one member plus substitute to Supplier Development Co Limited as detailed in 3.18. Have we got any? Stephen?
If no other members are coming forward, I'd like to nominate Councillor Marshall.
As the member. Anybody interested in substitute? We'll do the substitute at a later date unless you can find somebody to substitute. No, we'll do that one at a later date then. 2.14 to appoint one member to West Coast Rail 250 as detailed in 3.19. Steve?
I'd like to nominate, if they're willing to take up the position, Councillor Wood.
I'd like to nominate Councillor Fairbairn.
Happy to second, Councillor Wood.
Okay. Should have done actually.
Okay, I have an motion to appoint one member to the West Coast Rail 250 as detailed 3.19. The motion is put forward by Councillor Johnston, seconded by Councillor Crothers, and that's for Councillor Fairbairn to be nominated. And the amendment is by Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Marshall, and that's for Councillor Wood. Councillor Drybrough?
Amendment.
Councillor Wood?
Amendment.
Councillor Brodie? Councillor Crothers?
Motion.
Councillor Dempster?
Amendment.
Councillor Fairbairn?
Motion.
Councillor Gilroy? Councillor Giusti?
Motion.
Councillor Hagman?
Amendment.
Councillor Inglis?
Motion.
Councillor James?
Motion.
Councillor Johnston?
Motion.
Councillor Lever?
Amendment.
Councillor Marshall?
Amendment.
Councillor Martin?
Amendment.
Councillor McComb?
Motion.
Councillor Nicholl?
Motion.
Councillor Sloan?
Amendment.
Councillor Thompson?
Amendment.
Councillor Young?
Amendment.
And the votes are 10. Would the chair like to exercise the casting
Amendment.
vote?
Thank you.
The amendment carries. And Councillor Wood?
Okay, finally in 2.15 to appoint one member plus substitute to the Business Loan Scotland West Regional Management Group as detailed in 3.2. Are there any members interested in the member plus substitute? Tie that over. Councillor Thompson?
I'm wondering, a wee bit slower in the uptake with this one, but maybe we could maybe get a bit more of a sales pitch for why it would be attractive to a member to go on it.
Alistair? Ewan, can you say a few words on that particular one, the Business Loan Scotland West Regional Management Group?
Happy to, Chair. Business Loan Scotland is the organisation and board that runs Business Loan Scotland. The council is a member of that company, and if previous members in EEI will recall that it's a loan fund that the council is part of, and it's providing loans for small businesses. What we're asking for is a member to go on the regional board, which will be decision making about loans to businesses, not just in this area, but in the west of Scotland.
How often does it meet?
About 3 to 4 times a year.
Ian? Sold? You want to go into Ian? And Malcolm sub. Yep. Happy with that, everybody? Okay, move on to report number 6, which provides members with the financial outturn information for the EI Revenue Budget 2016-17. This represents an improved position from the last monitoring report presented to members, indicating a potential overspend of 480k. The Directorate Management Team have implemented a number of measures which allowed overspend to be significantly reduced. However, these measures were unable to fully mitigate the income shortfall experienced with planning and regulatory services and the non-achievement of the full budgeted surplus for the roads maintenance trading account. resulting in a year-end net overspend of 296k. Over and above these pressures, 2.834 million, 93% of the savings applied against the 2016-17 EEI budget were delivered, and the Director, along with his management team, will take any questions on the report. Members? Stephen?
I'd like to nominate. No, right. Okay. What I was going to ask. Recently at Policy and Resources Committee, we were looking at this overspend effectively there, and how it wasn't going to be carried forward into this year's requirements for savings. So I was trying to understand, and I couldn't quite find the answer, because obviously that was absorbed, if you like, by other unallocated budgets. So am I to understand that this doesn't carry into this financial year, and it's effectively been met from the unallocated budgets?
Alistair?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the P&R committee decided that this would be written off from corporate resources in this current old year, in the old year. So there'll be no carry forward.
Richard, and then Jim.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Look, I refer to 4.2.3. It says the main reason for the shortfall related to the roads maintenance trading account. I'm just looking for a bit of clarification in a bit plain English here. And the fourth line says the shortfall was due to an under-recovery of income due to changes in the spend profile of the portfolio of works undertaken by the road service. Just a bit more clarification on that. Does that mean that we didn't recover the costs of the accounts, or does it mean we got the pricing wrong? And also in 4.83, it continues, the external trading operations of enterprising services are currently being reviewed in light of the Outturn, in particular the level of charges applied by the roads and maintenance trading service. Does that mean that we underprice jobs? That's two questions there.
Caroline?
Thank you, Chair. Basically, we are at the mercy, to a certain extent, of the plans of our external contractors. This doesn't relate to the internal, our internal work, but the external work that we do for mainly Transurf, but other utility companies. Now, to a certain extent, what we had was that the utility companies didn't provide us with as much reinstatement work as we had been expecting, and that Transurf changed some of the methodology of the working practices that they wanted us to adapt, which led to a slight reduction in some of the profitability of some of the contracts that we had undertaken. Unfortunately, these are out with our control, as we're the client rather than as we're the contractor, so we're subject to the client's requirements on those things. It wasn't that we didn't make money on what we did, we just didn't make as much money as we had hoped for and had been put into the cross-service review. And obviously, we're reviewing that in light, the working practices, we're negotiating changed working practices to improve the profitability. And obviously, with the end of the contract, we're looking at that to see whether we can improve the profitability of that.
Do you want to come back on that?
Just a point, Chairman. If it was the other way about, and the council changed the rules for the contracts we were commissioning, then obviously we would expect to pay a larger charge. So maybe explain why we couldn't impose a larger charge and transfer it on the public companies.
We're subject to the contractual arrangements that we've signed up to. We can try and negotiate, but we can't kind of dictate terms, unfortunately.
Jim?
Thanks, Chair. I note in 4.1.1 that there is a 22% reduction in fee income from planning applications. Has there been a commensurate fall in the overall number of planning applications, or has the composition of the planning applications changed?
Steve, you're coming to answer that, I hope?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, in response to the question, the level of decrease in the number of planning applications received last year was not of the same magnitude as the drop-off in the fee income. So what that indicates is that there's been a slowing down in some of the higher value and bigger projects across the region. So the numbers of applications that we received last year were actually only down by 13%, whereas our fee income was down by 22%. So there's a big gap there. The other point to make is that fee income generally across the whole of Scotland in planning applications does not cover the cost of dealing with applications, which is why the government has been lobbied for a number of years now to review and introduce higher levels of charges. Basically, the fees on average only cover about 60% of the costs of dealing with applications. So there's a desperate need for that whole fee structure to be overhauled and reviewed by government.
You want to come back, Jim?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Certainly, a reduction of 13% strikes me as very worrying in view of the, the economic health of Dumfries and Galloway. It rings the alarm bells, certainly.
There's obviously that concern right across council, Jim, and we're hoping to try to put things in place with a report later on in the papers. Ian, did you want to come in?
It's on the very same subject. I mean, I suppose I beat this drum most times when it comes round regards to planning application fees and the correlation between that and a statutory duty or service that we have to supply as a council. So I brought up this many times, unlike enterprise and DG, where we actually go out, commission work, look for work, we go through a tender process and we compete against other organisations or companies. This is actually a statutory service that we have to supply. So this is no criticism of the planning department whatsoever. This is just to say how it's actually being put in front of us. I don't fully agree with it. I understand there is a less volume. There's less volume of applications, they're not at the same value, so we haven't brought in as much money as we have in other years. But whether the council at one time, if you go back far, didn't used to charge anything for planning. Now we do. Now it's look as if it's Scottish Government's got to take a position, it'll go even higher. I mean, it's a correlation between the planning fees. We see we're having this read to us as being an under recovery in fees, and we should actually, and it's forcing us down the direction we should be lifting the planning application fee, and I think certainly in some cases we absolutely should. But I don't believe it's a statutory service. If it was social worker education, if we're saying, listen, it's school meals, it's a statutory service, so to speak, or whatever it may be, or we must put that correlation between providing a meal, we must get cost recovery for that meal. I just don't think, I know it's a different committee, but it's the same format that I think we should be using a similar format across all the services. I have a bugbear about that. I think it is where it is. We've got an underspend in this 353k, unless it's a complete driver to actually increase the charges accordingly. But our number one priority in the council is building the local economy. I think there's a detriment to that if we use that as a driver. We should be always looking for cost recovery, but we shouldn't be forcing it down ourselves, into our own faces at every opportunity.
Steve, do you want to respond to
that? Chair, the only comment I would make to that is that it's the government's stated aim is to achieve full cost recovery, both in development management and in building standards, and that's why they are committed to reviewing fee levels.
Okay. Anybody else? Jim?
Just a very brief question on page 20.
See, you have no belief in that.
On page 29, policy development allocations applied and carried forward. The High Street facelift scheme, it's forecast to be utilised by 2016-17. That's now passed. Has that scheme been utilised in full? Because there's always a concern about the promotion of that scheme and how it was taken up. So is that now fully utilised?
Ewan, do you want to come and answer that?
Yes, indeed it is. It's fully allocated, and the reason that the figure's there is because there's sometimes a lag between allocation and drawing down the grant.
Okay, members, go to the recommendations. Stephen.
Thanks for letting me in again. It was actually a question on 4.6.2 on page 23, and it's just a question in relation to how effective we are at achieving our expectations for energy efficiency measures. And I'm just wondering, although it does say in the narrative there'll be additional savings because of new and emerging technologies in this financial year, we seem to not quite get the level of assumption of savings quite right with this, and this has been going on, this is a regular occurrence. So I'm just wondering, how do we know we're getting it right this year, given the track record?
Alistair, one thing I would say is obviously one of the achievements or the KPIs that we need to do is make sure that they're smart and achievable, but realistic as well.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. On these savings, they are carried forward into 17-18, so we have to make up on that shortfall, both for the grey mileage and for the energy. There were some projects that we were doing, we've only received a part-year benefit. So into this next financial year, 17-18, we'll get a full year benefit, and we'll report to members in our monitoring report how we're achieving that catch-up. There are also other projects that we're looking at, obviously, and we'll advise members as the year goes on.
Okay, thanks. Go to the recommendation, members. 2.1, the economy, environment, infrastructure return on overspend of 296k against the 2016 agreed budget. This is equivalent to 0.6% of the net budget and is detailed in Appendix 1. To note, 2.2, the progress in delivering the agreed savings applied to 2016-17 economy, environment, infrastructure budget is detailed in Appendix 2. And 2.3, the utilisation of policy development allocation provided to economy, environment, infrastructure for financial year 2016-17 as detailed in Appendix 3. Okay. We'll go on to report number 7 now. This report provides members with a financial progress update for the projects and programmes contained within the 2016-17 capital programmes for economic development, vehicles, fleet and infrastructure, as well as street lighting spend to save programme. I would draw members' attention to page 58 of Appendix. The B721 East Rigs is going to be deferred for further local consultation on this one. And James MacLeod will take any questions on the report. We've got Eileen Woods, Ewan Green and Jason Sayers also in attendance. Anything to add?
Nothing to add to the report, Chair. Thank you.
Member Stephen.
Thanks. Yeah, again, Chair. It was actually a question on the timber transport funding. When I was reading the report, I understood that there was a bid in. But
that's the next report.
Thanks, Chair. Just a couple of quick questions. On 3.8, the conservation scheme, do we have a list of the schemes that actually came forward for this and how they actually scored? And I'll do another question at the same time. The Stranraer East Pier, the assessment has still been done and the due diligence has taken place. Can we confirm that this will be finished by September?
The Stranraer East Pier is a different project, is it? No? Right, okay. Jason?
And what the cost is, Chair?
Thanks, Chair. I'm not entirely sure what was meant by scoring of individual projects. There are individual projects as part of the Conservation Area Regeneration Scheme, and they comprise of priority projects which are specified, key projects relating to individual buildings, and there's also the small grants programme, which as yet has not been allocated specifically. That's going to be a two-tier pot of funding that's going to be open to applications once that project is live. I think that's actually subject to a further report on this agenda. With regard to the East Pier costs, that will be subject to a further report in September, once we are in full possession of the final costs, which will come out of the ground investigation surveys, which are currently underway.
Tommy?
I don't understand why the officer doesn't understand what I'm asking about, the list of applicants that applied for the car scheme within Stranraer, and where they scored, which is a reasonable question in order of priority? And if so, do we have a list of those?
Come back on that.
We don't have a list of applicants for the small grants programme because that will be subject to individuals applying for the grants at the appropriate time. Where we have individual properties that are form part of that project, they are specified within the programme. There are two distinct parts to the conservation area scheme. One is priority projects, the other is small grants, and the grant process currently has not gone live.
Jeff?
311, the Dumfries High Street, given that the design phase is obviously underway, when will the actual physical work be starting in the High Street?
The work that we're carrying out at the moment is a strategic piece of work that is looking to identify which are going to be the priority areas of work. So we would anticipate that work will either commence at the back end of this financial year or will roll forward into the following financial year.
Patsy?
Thank you, Chair. I'm just looking at 3.16. I'm just curious about the property improvement programme. I'm not really familiar with that, and it seems to be concentrated on Langham and Dalbeattie, which is absolutely fine. I just don't know what the budget for this is and whether other towns can bid in for it, if it's in conjunction with the facelift scheme. I'm just not quite sure what it is.
Property improvement programme was actually approved by this committee back in 2012 and started, it is a region-wide programme that has been open to small towns and the large towns by small businesses within and across Dumfries and Galloway. There has been steady take-up of the budget that we've had available, which started off at £400,000. That's been rolled forward as a rolling programme. It's been quite successful. The Dalbeattie and the Langham initiatives have looked at innovative ways of utilising that, the grant availability, to drive out added value in the town centres there. It's been quite successful. We hope it's a model that we could move forward. We do have a very modest budget that's rolled forward into the next financial year, and I think the year after that. Following the take-up of that, we'll carry out a review, and the report will come back to the committee.
Patsy, what?
Well, yes, I'm just curious that, Langham and Dalbeattie have been singled out here. Do you single out towns and approach them to see if they've got plans for the town centres, or is it up to various businesses in any town to come forward? Because I have to say I'm not very familiar with this, and I've got one property in Kirkcudbright that could benefit hugely.
Thank you, Chair. We were specifically approached by businesses within those towns that have relevant organisations that drive forward initiatives like town centre improvements. They were aware of the grant under the shopfront improvement, and they made a specific approach with a view to a number of shopkeepers applying. We talked about the potential to bring forward a collective application where there was sufficient interest so that we could try to drive out additional added value, either by shopkeepers inputting more of their own contributions into the project and identifying additional aspects that we could deliver under the project. So, for example, that might be improving signage within the town. It might be providing more litter bins within the town, in addition to improving the street scene on the high street by improving shopfront.
Richard, and then Tommy.
Yeah, thanks. So, looking for the 20 mile an hour limits on page 62. There's ones at Moffat, Langham, and Annan, and there's different sort of schemes there. I think the Langham one's is a government scheme. The Moffat one is suggesting 20 mile an hour speed limit without traffic calming measures, and the Annan one, it needs traffic calming measures. But so I don't really understand that. I think the move is a way to have 20 mile an hour limits without speed bumps, etc., which aren't very popular, and lead to further problems, I think. So just a bit of clarification of why we can't move to 20 mile an hour without these traffic calming measures.
John, you going to answer this one?
Good morning. The scheme at Langham is a joint exercise with Transport Scotland. We have proposals for a 20 mile per hour speed limit on part of the 7 Trunk Road. What we've looked at is the potential for 20 mile per hour speed limits on some of the side roads off the Trunk Road, and what we looked at was locations where the speeds were low enough that traffic calming measures weren't required. And additionally, what that proposal would do would actually minimise the number of entries into a zone as a whole, and the two road authorities work together rather than isolation. The consideration that we've been given at Moffat is in relation to the prioritisation list that the council has for 20 mile per hour speed limits, which has as a priority identifying locations with clusters of reported injury accidents. As the paper indicates, we had accidents in Moffat. We've undertaken some speed measurements there, and again the speeds were slow enough that potentially a 20 mile per hour speed limit could be introduced in the town centre. But what we want to look at is how far that could extend from the high street. So we need to do more speed measurements. And I believe the one you're referring to is the one in Annan, is the one on Bank Street and St John's Road. And as we see there, that what we've done there is measured the speeds again. The speeds there are higher, and there comes a point where traffic calming measures are required to actually physically bring the speeds down to a value closer to where a 20 mile per hour speed limit is appropriate.
Want to come back in, Richard?
Just quickly, yeah, well, I think we're moving towards more 20 mile an hour limits without speed bumps, and I think Edinburgh is a classic case where they've introduced it in quite a large proportion of the city. So I think we should be thinking about moving towards that sort of model in the future.
Tommy and Jim.
Yes, Chair. Sorry to be boring about this, but with apologies to the officer who answered my question on 3.8, it's probably me just being a bit thick. I'm just not understanding the answer. The individual projects, like the Harbour Master's Office, how were these selected? And what happened to the ones that weren't selected?
Maybe I can answer that. The projects for EE&I, for the Stranraer project, came to EE&I as an overall package, and they were agreed at EE&I at one of the previous earlier meetings as part of the overall project for Stranraer. So it was EE&I that agreed the projects going forward, as opposed to Jason and his actual team. So as part of the overall package for the Stranraer regeneration, those buildings and priorities were put in by EE&I committee.
Obviously, Chair, I wasn't here.
Absolutely, Tom.
At that time. But can I ask how these projects were scored then? How they were selected? Who selected?
Jason.
This is a conservation area regeneration scheme. So the properties that were selected form part of a joint dialogue with Historic Environment Scotland to identify those properties that were felt to be most in need of investment. This project is also, I should point out, funded by Historic Environment Scotland, so their input into this was critical.
Well, where the E&I input, Tom? It came to microphone.
Don't normally need one, Chair, but
this is recorded, Tommy. So
oh well,
it's a public list.
I better shut up now. I just wanted to know how they prioritised it, how you selected one over the other.
I don't think there was a selection one over the other. It was a range of buildings that came forward. The discussion with the council and Historic Environment Scotland, and those came forward as a package, basically, for the funding that was available. Jim.
Could I just just very briefly, Chair, and say...
No, I'm going to let Jim in, and then I'll come back to you,
if the officer would actually just furnish me with the information, I'd be happy.
Can you meet beside the committee, and then I'll organise that information for you, Tommy, okay? Jim?
Thanks, Chair. Page 32, the key issues in economic development, the reprogramming of projects in Upper Nithsdale. I'd be interested to know what that actually means. I know staff are active now in the Upper Nithsdale area, but one of the projects that should have been completed in March this year is only now in its infancy. If that's what it means, a delay, then I'm content with that, but I'm interested. The word reprogramming kind of piqued my interest. And the other thing is just, everybody appreciates a daft laddie question. On page 53, I think the third or fourth, the asset class capital projects, U311, Deer Park Avenue, outside number 61. Well, it's in Sankar, obviously, but it's the only one that identifies that. We're surely not saying we've fixed a pothole on outside number 61 and put it in the papers, because no one else does it identify a house number associated with a street. So I don't know if it's a print problem or whether there's something unique with it.
Who's going to answer that one?
Thank you, Chair. It is an oversight, I'm afraid. What it is it would have been the start point of the scheme would have been outside number 61, and it would have extended there. So it would have been along Deer Park Avenue, starting at one point. And generally, we don't specify the start and end points, but obviously in this instance, it has been it's been taken out.
And the one in, it was a delay, was it? Okay, thank you, members. Can we go to the recommendations? Members are asked to note the financial outturn position of the Economic Development Asset Class Capital Programme 2016-17 of 1.403 million, resulting in a carry forward of 0.224 million in 2017, Appendix 1. Note 2.2, the financial outturn position of Vehicle Fleet Class Capital Programme 2016 of 0.565 million, resulting in a carry forward of 0.095 million to 2017-18. Can I just say something on that particular one? Because I was up at an APSI conference in Aviemore, and the traffic commissioner was there, and they took two examples of local authorities on how they deal with their vehicle fleet. And I have to say that Dumfries and Galloway, she was really impressed by the way the fleet was actually being dealt with in Dumfries and Galloway, especially after the Glasgow bin lorry situation, where they found that their maintenance schedule and that was all over the place. And she found that Dumfries and Galloway had a maintenance schedule of 96%. The other 4% were actually vehicles which were in for repair or actually taken off the road. So can I congratulate the vehicle fleet side of things on that particular one. So that was 2.2. 2.3, the financial outturn position of the Infrastructure Asset Class Capital Programme 2016-17 of 10.17 million, resulting in an acceleration of funding of 0.67 million from 2017-18. Note 2.4, the progress of the Vehicle Fleet Asset Class Capital Programme 2016-17. 2.5, the progress of the Infrastructure Asset Class Capital Programme 2016-17, and 2.6, the progress of street lighting spend to save LED replacement programme. Again, another good project that's ongoing within the council. And can we just add that thanks to the fleet manager for the way he's doing the maintenance side of things. Okay. Happy with that? Thank you. Okay, we'll go into item number 8, additional infrastructure capital programmes. The report provides details of additional proposed schemes to be undertaken in the year 2017-18 within the infrastructure asset class capital programmes, following the allocation of additional funding of 1.28 million by full council on 28th of February 2017. I'm also delighted to announce that EE&I have been successful in their bid to the Strategic Timber Transport Fund and have been awarded £1.4 million. Members are reminded these are additional projects over and above the capital expenditure programme agreed at the March 2017 EEI committee, and I will ensure all members receive a link to that report for their fullest information. James is here, will take any questions on the report. Eileen is also here in attendance. Members, over to you, Stephen.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, so obviously I was a wee bit premature in my blurting out the question in the previous paper, but no, that's good news about the 1.4 million. I think the question then is the timescale for the implementation of the various schemes within that timber transport, and can those details be provided, or is that going to be circulated separately or brought back to the next committee?
Eileen?
Thank you, Chair. We're currently working on the programming at the moment. The funding allocation was just released the other week, so we're currently working on the programming of that in conjunction with the other capital works. With the conditions of the grant, the work will be delivered this financial year, so it's trying to program in with everything else, and we will be delivered that in due course.
Graham?
Thanks, Chair. Just the 1.4 million we're very welcome, but the last time we had a major road collapse in the Kersfairn Money Ive area some years ago, the 1.4 million just disappeared into the bog. You know, it doesn't replace an awful lot of road, 1.4 million. But that wasn't my point. In page 75, the B7027 South Ayrshire boundary to Bar Hill. Have we started repairing roads for South Ayrshire Council? Because Bar Hill, the last time I heard, was in South Ayrshire. Somebody explain that to me.
Eileen?
Sorry, it is actually within our boundary. It's from the South Ayrshire boundary back down, and it's just the naming of the scheme that's been given that sort of discrepancy there. So we'll be happy to show you exactly where the scheme is.
I'd be happy to look at that.
And I'm happy to allow you to look at it. Ian?
Thanks, Chairman. Welcome the extra funding that's here, obviously, across the region. When you look at the appendix and the work that's involved, it looks like Arndale and Estill hasn't got any drainage issues, which we all know in Arndale and Estill it has. There hasn't been any funds, I think, allocated to Arndale and Estill. It's a small amount, just it's only 28. Oh no, it's 280k, sorry, so no, it's actually quite a large amount. I thought it was 28, it's actually it's over $250,000. So there's a particular reason why. I see that on page 78 is what I'm looking at. Doesn't seem to be any works in regards to drainage in Arndale and Estill. That seems to be the case. I know, I mean, I had recently had locally to me, somebody flooded out because surface water from the public roads was discharged onto their property and they got flooded out. They're out the premises for 6 months. Work still hasn't been undertaken. It's maybe underway through a different revenue scheme, I'm not sure. But I mean, I suppose, that was the one thing that stood out to me, an overall caution. I mean, I'll get that away from the committee, I think, how the regional spend, what that's actually looking like. But absolutely welcome the 1.28 million, but is there any particular reason why there's no money being spent in Arndale and Estill in regards to drainage?
Eileen?
Thank you. These are purely the additional schemes. In the initial capital programme that went in March, there are detailed schemes there for drainage in Arndale and Estill. Purely these ones on page 78 are the additional schemes that have been added with the extra money there, and it's just been on a prioritisation basis. Some of them have actually been extensions of existing schemes that were in the capital programme, and others, but there will be a reprioritisation if required.
Sean?
Yeah, it was on the same point. I did notice it was additional schemes, and I think what would be appropriate if members, particularly new members that weren't on the committee prior to the elections, actually, if you could send a copy of the full programmes.
I've already asked for that sort of road spend and all that thing to come forward as part of the induction of members, and that'll go forward for there. But certainly in that respect, that certainly should be included in the understanding of members. Yeah. Can we go to the recommendations then? Members are asked to agree the additional list of infrastructure asset class capital projects 2017-18 reported in the appendix. We agree that? Agree the additional 2.2. Agree the additional works to be funded from the infrastructure asset class that have been added since this programme was approved at this committee on 9th of March 2017, and subsequent deferring of approved schemes as detailed in paragraphs 310 to 315. Agreed. 2.3. Note Dumfries and Galloway Council bid for grant funding from Ian.
Just a point of clarity in regards to, because I'm looking at this, thinking of the previous historical information that we've had, our roads and infrastructure. I think our roads alone are over £200 million in backlog. I just wonder in process, before we go to 2.3, that's why I've stopped here, happy to agree 2.3, but just for procedural report, when will we see that level of, so we understand that level of information, and so we understand how we profile our spend, the amount of money we've got, how we allocate, so on and so forth. just when will we see that? Because this has just brought it to the head again. You can see it. We've got a real underinvestment in Dumfries and Galloway across the region in regards to that. If you're thinking over nearly £250 million with the backlog in that maintenance scheme.
We can bring that forward and speak about that at the induction orientation of members, particularly new members, and then we can develop it on from that once we start that discussion. So we understand what members would want to see rather than just have a stab at it. But there is a whole process, and these schemes that you see in this additional programme, it's money it's allocated where there's a need based on our road condition index, and we can explain all that to members during the induction process.
Okay, thank you. 2.3 then, in recommendation note, Dumfries and Galloway Council's bid for granting funds from Strategic Timber Transport Scheme, identifying the proposed projects to be funded as a detailed paragraph 3.16 to 318. Noted. Stephen?
Yeah, it's just, I mean, should we, acknowledging that we have actually been successful, maybe note the success of the bid for that and etc.?
Happy to do so. Note the success of the bid. Now move on to report number 9, Galloway Glens Landscape Partnership Scheme. Report by Director of Economy, Environment and Infrastructure. This presents members with a review of the development stage of the Galloway Glens Landscape Partnership Scheme. The Galloway Glens Scheme in brackets, which culminates in the submission of the Stage 2 bid to the Heritage Lottery Fund, HLF, by the 11th of August 2017. The report provides a draft overview of the project listing from the Stage 2 bid, which will form part of the Landscape Conservation Action Plan, the primary supporting document to the application. This overview was requested at EEI Committee in September 2016 and will form the content of the Stage 2 application. The report also seeks approval from members to enter in a Memorandum of Agreement with Kirkcudbright Development Trust as part of the Galloway Glens Scheme for the management of Bar Hill Walks, Kirkcudbright. Simon Fieldhouse will take any questions on the report, and McNabb Laurie. You and Green suddenly turned to McNabb Laurie. All right. Members. Can we go to the recommendation then? Members are asked to 2.1 note the work done to date through the development stage of the Galloway Glens Scheme as detailed at paragraph 3.1 to 3.6. 2.2 note the proposed project listing which will form part of the Stage 2 bid attached to Appendix 2. And 2.3 agree the Council enters in a Memorandum of Understanding for Bar Hill Woods, Kirkcudbright with the Kirkcudbright Development Trust as detailed at paragraph 3.15 to 322 to agreeing a suitable and sustainable management plan. Everybody up with that? Excellent, thank you. That was a good one. Okay, report number 10 then is the Council's policy on invasive non-native species. This is a matter that has long concerned members, and I can remember certainly Dennis Mail in the previous session was very concerned about, invasive non-native species, and he's done a lot of good work with people like the Galloway Fisheries Trust. The report addresses the need for a council policy on invasive non-native species, as agreed at the Economy, Environment and Infrastructure Committee in November 2016. It outlines the role of partners' responsibility in relation to INNS and considers how best to raise awareness of the Council's INNS policy amongst elected members and the public. Simon Fieldhouse will take any questions on the report, and Peter Norman also in attendance. Members? Okay, no members? Sorry, Stephen.
It was just a quick question about, it's to do with page 90, section 2 at the very top. Subject to the provisions of this part, any person who plants or otherwise causes to grow any plant in the wild at a place with its native range is guilty of an offence. And it was just a wee bit of clarity. Obviously, our interest primarily for our policy would be for council land for which the council is responsible. And I'm just trying to think of examples where we would look at sort of play areas or sort of managed land, and it was more of a pedantic thing about what the difference between land that we're responsible for and in the wild would be, because a lot of our land isn't in the wild as such, it's actually maintained and managed, so it's just a wee bit of clarification.
Peter, do you want to answer that?
Thanks for the question. Yep, the guidance which goes with the legislation does actually have a couple of pages about what constitutes in the wild and what is not in the wild. Obviously, if it came to a court case, that would go for the court to decide, but there is detail there, and you're quite right that a lot of the land that the council deals with would fall into the category of not being wild land.
That's it.
It's just a bit of clarification at 3.5, where the second sentence in that bit says complete control of INS on all council land is neither necessary under legislation, affordable, nor practically feasible. Does that apply to private landowners as well, or has the council got a law for themselves?
Yeah.
That would apply to all landowners, not just the council.
Because I was under the impression that if you had giant hogweed or Japanese knotweed or whatever heck you had to deal with it. You weren't allowed just to let it run rampant. It wasn't. I thought you had to notify and get advice and do the work and remove it before it spread.
There's no requirement to remove existing species unless you've done something which has actually caused those species to be there in the first place. And there's no requirement to, unless Scottish Government specifically requests it, there's no requirement to notify anybody of the presence of those species.
Okay. Ian?
Just a quick one, Chair, and as far as you look at the report, it's certainly welcome. Look forward to the briefing as well as we go forward. We're good to get back up to speed. I've been to 2 or 3 seminars and such like. But obviously, we've got an appendix here that outlines what our policies are and what our kind of strategy is, and as far as moving forward. Any idea what the level of resource is connected to that? What is our level of resource in order to, I mean, is it just, it might be a piece of paperwork, the fact that, and it's Peter has the bulk of the work and he does his best, but it's a query because it isn't actually mentioned. I don't see it within the report. How much money do we actually put behind this?
Yeah.
It's very difficult to put an actual figure on it because a lot of the work that is done within departments as part of the routine work. The recommendations in the policy wouldn't require any additional expenditure.
Yeah.
I would note that maybe it's something we may or may not be looking at in the future, because opposite area committees we do, Andy and Esther's been very passionate, I think, and very strong in regards to giving money towards this type of policy, I would say, Chairman.
Okay, we'll have a look at that in the future. Members, we'll go to the recommendation. 2.1 is note the role of partners' responsibility in relation to invasive non-native species, as outlined in paragraphs 3.2 to 3.4. 2.2, agree the council policy on invasive non-native species outlined in paragraph 3.5 in the appendix. And 2.3, agree the inclusion of an invasive non-native species INSA web page on the council site and consider whether a member seminar would be useful. We've agreed that it would be useful to have a member seminar on that to disseminate INS information and council policy as outlined in paragraph 3.7, 3.8. Would agree, Dan? Thank you. We're now going to report number 11, Dumfries and Galloway Core Pass Plan Update 2017. This report updates members on the delivery of the Dumfries and Galloway Core Pass Plan. It also seeks members' approval to accept external funding for the South West Coast, Scotland Coast Path runs to Galloway. And I would advise members that because of information, emails and letters that I've had, I'm proposing that the extinguishing of Core Path 378 is deferred till the September meeting so that the Community Council and local landowners can get together and have a discussion on where that can actually go. Simon Fieldhouse will take any questions on the report other than the Core Path 378 because that's going to be deferred till September. Jim?
You'll be pleased to know it's not a specific one, but it seems to me that core paths are not being maintained the way that local users across the region would hope. And we've given some of that work to the criminal justice or community payback team now. And I don't know whether they don't have the staffing now that they've taken on some of the closed burial grounds or no. But I find it difficult to endorse the introduction of additional core paths while not maintaining the ones we have to what would be generally assumed to be a reasonable standard, given that they're in the more rural locations that we don't expect a bowling green, but there should be some level of maintenance carried out on them.
Simon?
Thank you, Chair. We do have a maintenance contract in place throughout the grass cutting season. This is the second year we've run this. In addition, well, as opposed to obviously having things in-house being managed through an in-house team and criminal justice, there are a few teething troubles. We are looking to resolve that, but each path that we've got on the core path network should have at least a minimum of 2 cuts per year, if not more where that's needed. So obviously happy to talk to the member about specific issues offline and try and get those resolved.
Thanks for that, Chair.
Andrew?
Chair, I welcome the Dumfries and Galloway core path. However, I've got some questions as to where it will start and where it will end. Will it start in Cairnryan and end in Stranraer, going round the loop, or will it come round? Just for clarity on that.
Thank you, Chair. For clarity at this moment in time, we're looking at it starting in Stranraer and ending in Stranraer. The idea is to try and tie that into other works within Stranraer in terms of making that a regeneration centre and looking at using the rail link a bit more.
Andrew?
What I would say is that I have my own personal experience of working with the Core Path team, and after reporting an incident up in Moniai with a wooden bridge, it was repaired extremely quickly. And I would just like to congratulate you. Actually, you know, it was a really good and very quick response, so thank you.
Okay, Jim?
Thanks, Chair. I would welcome your decision to defer 2.3. I feel that wider consultation is most definitely required on that topic. But just to echo some of the things Jim was saying a few minutes ago, access to the core paths can be a problem. The length of the grass, the brambles which are growing, etc. But there is another issue with regard to vehicular access. A number of these core paths provide access to telecoms masts. Do we have any agreements with the utilities provider as to when access will be available, and will they make good any damage done to the core paths by the vehicles?
Simon?
Thank you, Chair. In relation to the utilities companies, obviously they have separate legislation to allow them to undertake the work that they need to do. We do try and work with the companies where possible to look at dates and access and ensure that the routes are put in to a reasonable standard afterwards, but that's not always the case. It's a policy that we're looking at how we can improve that working relationship.
Okay, members, can we go to the recommendation? So 2.1 is to note the progress of Dumfries and Galloway Core Path Plan for 2017 at Appendix 1. 2.2, agree to accept external grant funding for South West Scotland Coast Plan. Dumfries and Galloway is detailed in paragraph 3.29. 2.3 as in the report is now no longer, it's been deleted. 2.3 would then be, what is 2.4? Agree that officers investigate the establishment of core paths in the Bladnoch-Wigton area with a core path review process starting 2018-19 as detailed, paragraph 3.22. Happy with that? Okay. Okay, report number 12 then is the Local Development Plan Supplementary Guide and Consultation Responses. This report seeks approval for a revised version of LDP Supplementary Guidance on Developer Contributions. Some members may recall that at the previous meeting of this committee we agreed that the guidance be changed in regard to the education contribution requirements. The revised version has been out to public consultation and the result of that is contained in the report. These changes were as a result of feedback from local developers and will help support the local economy by encouraging small-scale housing developments. Steve will take any questions on the report from members. Ian?
Certainly, Chairman. Thanks very much for getting the chance to speak on this as well. and everything I'll say here will hopefully be constructive. Certainly, it's intended in that way, so it is as a pre-warning. But certainly, I mean, I think the changes that have been applied and made, I think we should agree absolutely the right thing to do. We're heading in the right direction. But as I said previously, devil's in the detail. And I suppose the one small bone of contention I think I've still got that remains with myself in regards to this whole education tax developers' contributions, whichever way it's dressed up, Chairman, is that the trigger point for this coming into fruition in the first place is 80% capacity of preschool, primary or a secondary school. That trigger point, we look across the school, our assets are across for the schools across whole of Dumfries and Galloway, we're at 56% capacity is where we're at this moment in time. If you take Dumfries and Galloway as a whole, so 80% being the trigger point, you think, well, okay, then what's wrong with that? And we're a long way off it, which we are in a lot of places, but some places we're setting 100% and others. But ultimately, I think certainly for information I've gleaned in previous reports and committees that we've sat on, is that after the financial crisis, 2008, when it hit this area, hit the whole country, let's face it, and a big chunk of the world, but we certainly moved from being pretty much predominantly a private sector that delivered affordable housing in this area, housing stock, to now it's about 80, 85, maybe closer to 90% across Dumfries and Galloway, where registered social landlords actually supply the housing stock. So putting that into context, we have our RSLs, through no fault of their own, are now delivering by far the bulk of the housing developments in Dumfries and Galloway. Yet they've got an exclusion, just to put that into context. They won't pay this developer's contribution. So therefore, the pressure that comes when we reach 80%, that developer's contribution, so there's got to be any extra classes and such like, or rooms built on, whatever that infrastructure may be, a PE hall, whatever it may be, it's the private developers that pay for that predominantly. And that's when we've got my bone of contention. I think that's one piece we still have to look at. It's an excellent piece of work. I agree with what's come forward, and as far as good consultation, we've moved forward, we're heading in the right direction. But that wee bit of detail is still missing for me, Chairman. Whether we can take it further at this moment in time, clearly we've got a report here, but I mean, that is certainly my view, and it's certainly, again, the group are certainly looking to try and bring that to a better conclusion as what has been brought to at this moment in time. We understand dormant estates, we see within the paper, quite rightly, and the Scottish Land and Estates, I think they represent in particular, or part of that. Jamie Crothers has commented the fact that it's the right step in the right direction, that any housing with any developments with any public sector grant towards it has an exclusion, and we've looked at that. So I still think we have that wee bit further. If it applies to one, it applies to all, and there should be some burden placed on all developers if they're putting in a specific pressure in regards to further infrastructure to be required within our education. And we really do need it. It's away from here. We need our education assets. We need that brought into order. If we're sitting at 56% across Dumfries and Galloway, 80% trigger point, that sounds absolutely fine to stimulate this contribution. We need to look at the wider, in a different committee for a year, but we need to look at that particular point as well, Chairman.
There is one big difference, of course, is developers that are selling privately are actually making a profit out of the buildings anyway. So RSLs, there's no right to buy now, so there's issues there. Steve, do you want to come in now?
Chair, I think just a couple of comments really. I think, first of all, just to reiterate that in the two previous committee discussions that were had on this subject, I think it was made very clear that members supported the principle of developer contributions, and that this was really a matter of the fine detail of how this particular requirement was being applied. The second point is really just to say that if there is a fundamental issue about the education developer contributions requirement, then we have the opportunity to look again at that as part of the work that's underway on the review of the LDP and LDP2. And there's certainly, it's our intention to engage members fully in that process with a programme of seminars over the autumn period.
Jim?
Again, Chair, it's just another daft laddie question. I see on page 124 it talks about community benefit from wind energy development. And I thought we'd put all that nonsense to bed, because the Scottish Government guidelines on community benefit from wind farms suggests that this should be invested in the local communities. I take it we're not going back to these mad old days when we were contemplating taking half the community benefit for the council and spreading it across all of Dumfries and Galloway. These days are long gone, and we'd put that to bed. So I presumed that in terms of community benefit from wind farms, and I know this says wind energy development, that we left that to the local communities to deal with directly with the developers. Although we have a member of staff who's willing and able, provided they ask they being the local communities, ask the council for support.
My understanding of the decision is that the council had nothing to do with any community benefit other than to support the communities that wanted that benefit and then put plans and projects in place.
I agree with you, Chair, and that's why I'm curious about the phraseology in the first paragraph.
Steve, do you want to come in?
Chair, I think certainly the issue is flagged up in terms of the response that we received from the Communities Directorate on page 120. And I think it's quite clear that the council doesn't have its own policy on this, that there are national guidelines in place. I think this committee previously took some quite clear decisions on that, and it's intended that that's reflected in the wording that's within the actual supplementary guidance itself on the page that you referred to, Jim, page 124. So I think the wording that we've got there reflects the position that we don't get involved directly in those discussions and negotiations.
I'm grateful to Steve, Chair, for endorsing maybe what I'm thinking, but it does say quite clearly Dumfries and Galloway Council will engage in negotiations to secure community benefit. That's not what we agreed. We agreed we would leave that to local communities.
How did you come in there, Jim? Because what happens is those communities get in contact with the officer and they say, can you come and help me? That's the council's part of actually doing that. They get the officer up there to help them put the negotiations in place for them to get the benefit. And that's what certainly McNabb Laurie started and Mr. Parker's doing now. So he's basically out there helping the community negotiate with the companies.
I don't want to labour this, if that's a pun, fine.
Okay, you're not going to, then we're stopping
that. It doesn't happen where I live. They do their negotiations without any input and without any support because they feel they don't need it. And I worry that this would set up a position where we have agreed that council
the communities have got to ask for
involvement.
it. The communities in my area where there's wind farms actually asked for help. The communities in your area might not ask for help, that's fine. But the thing is, if they do, at least that support is actually there.
It says Dumfries and Galloway will negotiate. That's what it says in this paper.
Engage.
Or engage.
John.
Just to follow on from Councillor Carruthers' point of view earlier, where he pointed out that it perhaps was unfair that private developers had to pay a developer contribution, but housing associations seemed to be exempt. I just wanted to point out that I was quite surprised to see that DGHP are actively selling new properties, which would seem to give them some sort of advantage in regard to this.
DGHP, yeah?
The investments that are made by registered social landlords are already supported by public sector intervention. And that was why I think the view was taken that it would be inappropriate to request some of that public sector funding back to fund another public sector service, which is education. So their low-cost home ownership program is part of their overall affordable housing provision.
Okay, we're going to move on. Sorry, Jim.
Thanks, Chair. Going back to the developer contributions for education, has the likelihood table been modified in light of the focus now on the 80% capacity figure?
Steve?
Chair, yes, it has. There's been further consultation and involvement with our colleagues in the education service, and that table has been reviewed and overhauled. And in fact, the number of schools, the number of circumstances where a contribution is required has significantly reduced as a result of that review by education.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, members. We'll go to the recommendations in. Members are asked to 2.1 consider the responses received to the developer contribution supplementary guidance consultation. Agree the council's recommended response and proposed modifications where relevant in Appendix 1. 2.2 agree that to remit the powers to head of plan and regulatory service to notify Scottish ministers of the council's intention to adopt the developer contribution as statutory supplementary guidance as detailed at paragraph 3.9 and shown in Appendix 2. 2.3 adopt the developer contributions as statutory supplementary guidance following completion of the relevant adoption procedures as detailed at paragraph 3.10. And 2.4 agree that an ex gratia repayment is made to those applications affected by change to developer contribution supplementary guidance agreed at 9th of March 2017, Economy, Environment and Infrastructure Committee, and who have concluded their Section 69 agreements and paid the education developer contribution prior to that date as detailed in paragraph 3.6. Agreed? Okay. Okay, move on to report 13, which is Planning Performance Framework Annual Reports. The purpose of this report is to present to members for their consideration the draft Planning Performance Framework Annual Report for 2016-17 prior to submission to the Scottish Government. This highlights the continued improvements in the planning service and the important role it plays in supporting the local economy. The performance framework will be assessed by the Minister, and a summary of previous year's assessment is shown in Appendix 2. In future years, this could determine the level of planning fees we are allowed to charge, and I reiterate, this could determine the level of planning fees we are allowed to charge, so it's important that we have continued to evidence improvement. Steve Rogers is here to take any questions, and David Sutty is also in attendance. Members? Ian?
I suppose a quick one that goes back to a previous agenda item, just in regards to under recovery or no bringing as much revenue as we thought we maybe could have or would have at a certain moment in time. I just want, do you think, as we're going forward with a high level of performance, potential changes within at Scottish Government level, planning fees, so on and so forth, any predictions what that might look like, and as far as income generation is concerned?
Steve?
It's probably at this point.
Jim, can you turn your microphone off, please?
Yes, Chair.
Sorry.
Chair, at this point in time, it's probably too early to say. We've had the first phase of the review of planning fees announced recently, and from the 1st of June, there was an increase to the maximum fees payable for major applications, which can now attract a fee of up to 125,000. So it very much depends on how many of those type of applications we receive over the next 12 months. Government is also committed to a further comprehensive review of planning fees, but the Minister's made it absolutely clear that our ability to charge higher fees as a result of that further review will be linked to us being able to demonstrate that we are continuously improving our performance. And this is in response to dialogue that he has with, particularly with the house builders.
Yeah.
Thanks very much for that explanation, Steve. And as far as just a general question, round about performance, predominantly relates to speed, is my understanding. So we have an eight-week timeline in particular that we should adhere to. Very, very good at that. In regards to the council's own priority when it comes to building a local economy, is there any correlation? It's our number one priority. Is there any correlation between building a local economy and how we perform in regards to this actual report here?
Certainly, there's a strong correlation. The planning system and the delivery of the planning service is a key element of supporting the local economy. And certainly within our business plan, within the EEI business plan, we outline the key indicators and projects that support the different council priorities and commitments, and we'll be doing that when we review the business plan as well to make sure that link is very clear. But we're absolutely clear that that's a strong link.
Thanks very much, Chairman. Just one very small point. Well, I'll pick up a different time, Steve, but I think there should be a clear, strong connection between ourselves as a council building a local economy and what weight that may well be, how it may be considered as along with a regional economic strategy and so on and so forth when it comes to actually permissions being granted or not. So that's probably the point I'm try to pick up on in particular, maybe come back to it another time, probably out with the committee to start off with, Chairman.
Okay. Stephen?
Thanks, Chair. It's a couple of questions, some just on information in the actual report. Page 140 at the section 1.3.5. I think there's maybe a placeholder being put in there a couple of times just in terms of a number of legacy and active cases. Similarly, on page 148, the enforcement activity, I'm just wondering if there's an explanation as to why breaches identified wasn't available, and can that be available? And finally, on page 159, this is to do with regular and proportionate policy advice. It's one of the indicators where, although it's amber, which is okay, it's actually a sort of downward trend, if you like, as you'll see on page 160, sort of marker 11, it's sort of green, and then it's gone to amber. But the qualifying sort of note in that is that on page 159 at the top, you have 47 pieces of guidance in place. However, you fail to set out how these are applied in practice and how they set out what is required to support applications in a proportionate way. So I'm just wondering, obviously the other two are to do with factual details and information, but that one, what are we doing to get that back into the green? Because obviously that's the front end of planning, I suppose, where applicants are actually needing that to be better.
David, you on this one?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Councillor Thompson's quite correct. 1.3.5, we're finding some difficulty in getting that detail out of our new system. We knew how to do it out of the old back office system, but we're working on that. So yes, that is a placeholder. In terms of the enforcement thing, it is very difficult to establish sometimes the data which they're looking for in there. So it is another technical one that we've had some difficulty with. In terms of number 11, that was one of the things that we looked at quite closely. If there were any things which were being flagged up in the Minister's comments which we could try and improve and move from an amber to a green, we've done that. And this year I've expanded on some examples of where we've had supplementary guidance or guidance notes, for example, the small and medium business ones, where we've actually provided a link to that and shown how we're, through our pre-application engagement, are using those more. So I think it was really not that we weren't doing it, it was just to evidence how we were using it was what was missing.
Want to come back, Stephen?
Yeah, no, that's helped clarify. I think that then makes me ask, on page 134 in 3.5, it suggests that the new system is, however, now operational and is now bringing benefits to the processes. So I presume the data that you're having difficulty extraction will actually be one of the benefits that you're going to see from the new system.
You were ready for that one, weren't you?
Yes, it's still a work in progress, but we're getting there.
Okay, thanks very much. Can we go to the recommendation? Members are asked to consider the draft planning. Sorry, Graham.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's back to page 148, enforcement activity. When I see measurable data as flagged up as not available, it makes me suspicious. Not that I'm casting aspersions on the officers, but I just get a wee bit, not just me, the press, the general public, if there's something that's measurable, they like to know what the figures are, and it just says not available. Now, there are trends in there which are good. Cases taken up has dropped, cases resolved has risen, and that's very positive. But I find it difficult to know why we can't have complaints lodged and breaches identified with figures opposite them. And I'm just wanting to flag it up that I don't think that's acceptable in the long term.
David, I take it this is one of the improvements that we're actually looking for as well.
It is. It's one of the back office systems, again, has the uniform module has an enforcement one, which is one of the ones we're working on bringing online, which will then give us a more clear set of recordings. There is obviously, it's the word complaint is another word which we don't like, because complaint has a distinct meaning. If it was a potential breach, it's just the meaning of a complaint has made it difficult to record that. But yes, we're working on that.
Oh, that English language, yeah.
Are the trends getting better?
David, are the trends getting better?
I would probably just draw members' attention to the case that's resolved has an upward trend compared to the previous year.
So yes.
Chair, that's the ones that are there. I got feeling I was asking the officer for on the cases, complaints lodged and breaches identified.
Okay, can we move to the recommendation? And members are asked to consider the draft plan and performance framework annual report 2015-16 contained at Appendix 1 and agree to its submission to the Scottish Government. Agree that? Okay. Okay, we'll now move on to item 14, Stranraer Conservation Area Regeneration Scheme. This report is to advise members of progress in implementing the Stranraer Conservation Area Regeneration Scheme, or CARS, inform members of proposed project management arrangements and agree proposals for allocation of CARS property grants. And the grant scheme will support and encourage investment in key properties in Stranraer Town Centre, which is a regeneration priority for the council. Steve Rogers is here to take any questions along with Pam. Members, Tommy.
Thanks, Chair. The risk of being accused of being parochial and going back to the CARS project again. I'm not going to ask what the criteria is for selection for individual projects, because there doesn't seem to be an answer to that. But I note with interest there is a Stranraer Heritage Project Board which has been set up comprising of officers from different departments. Can I ask if there's member input to that?
Steve?
There's no member input to the board itself, but what we're looking to do is to develop engagement with ward members to keep them advised of progress with the project. That's going to be a key component going forward. Pam's our project officer on the ground, and certainly Pam will be looking to set up local briefings with all of the ward members to give them advice on the progress of the scheme. The project board itself is looking very much at the technical details of the refurbishment of each individual building that is being submitted. And going back to the question I think that was asked about the earlier report, we certainly intend to bring to this committee a list of all the grants that have been awarded. And in addition to that, I'm happy for us to share that information about applications received with the ward members as part of regular local briefings.
Tommy, you want to come back on it?
Yeah, just briefly, Chair. I'm surprised that a project board that is so central to the whole project is member free, does not have a member input, and that worries me.
Chair, the only comment I would offer is that this follows very much the corporate project management guidance, and project boards are established to run essentially all of our main capital projects now, and this is exactly the same as what's provided for in that guidance.
It is an operational issue, but I think the outputs from that will come back from members' decision. Plus, there's going to be the briefings. Local members could influence those decisions that are actually there, Tommy. So I think you will have that opportunity to influence the issues along the CARS project. I'm just going to bring in Ian first and I'll come back.
It's the same point. I think Councillor Sloan brings up a relevant point. Thinking back to Fisheries Local Action Group, Pam was involved in that actually. There was 2 members of this committee actually sat on that particular board, stroke panel, when it came to scoring the applications that came forward. I don't see any reason why something like that couldn't be applied in this case. Certainly worth a looking at. I think it shows leadership for the member in particular in regards to this. So certainly should be following that. If a strong leadership being shown, why should we not have members involved? I think members should play it as an active role as they possibly can, Chairman. Certainly would think it's a viable proposition.
This would be outside of this report, so it would be a decision that would made by you and I on a different report for member improvement. This is about the progress and the implementation and the governance arrangements for Stranraer and the proposals going forward. So I think, Director, do you want to say something on this?
Yes, if I could just give members confidence that we are delegated, and we've spoken about delegation, we are delegated to administer these schemes, and as Steve has explained, ward members will be involved in briefings and updates, but generally it's an officer task. And I think in the case of the fisheries that you raised, that was very much external European money, and that has different types of rules. But in this case, this is very much an officer-led scheme, and we will consult with members in that process.
Tommy, you had to come back in.
Yeah, just to disagree with Alistair on the consultation. I think members should be involved more in these decisions. It's not just this scheme I'm talking about.
Right, let's in a report. I'm going to talk to Alistair offline about bringing a report back about these types of projects and see where we can bring it for member participation.
Chair, can I just say that I think too much we get put in front of us that it's an operational matter. It's not for us to decide. It is for us to decide. It's what we're elected for.
It'll be for us to decide the major request. I mean, this has been decided before at this committee about how this project actually moves forward. This is not about this report, okay? The situation that you're discussing is how do you actually manage that report? It's an operational issue at the moment. At the moment, I'm going to suggest that something comes back later on to see how we can improve that for members' input, okay? Anybody else? We'll go to the recommendations. We'll note the progress and implementation of the Stranraer Conservation Area Regeneration Scheme as detailed at paragraphs 3.2 and 3.3. 2.2, note governance arrangement for the Stranraer Conservation Area Regeneration Scheme as detailed at paragraph 3.4, 3.7. And 2.3, will agree proposals for allocation of Conservation Area Regeneration Scheme property grant set out in paragraph 3.7, 3.8 and 3.9. And we'll add the other discussions on moving projects forward with members' input at the seminar. Stephen?
No, I think what you're suggesting is a good idea. I think maybe one of the things that when I was reading this slightly opened up an ambiguous interpretation was that the purpose of the report is to inform members of a proposed project management arrangement. And I think that word proposed suggests that maybe there needs to be a member agreement or an input into that proposition rather than just informing members of the project management arrangements. So if there's a proposal there which is in 3.4 to 3.7, it's just there to be noted, but it's a proposition. So I think it's maybe that wee consistency of language that maybe could have helped clarity on that one. But obviously you're bringing a report back, so that's fine.
Are you happy with that, Alistair, taking over that and move it forward with the suggestion? Yeah, okay. Ian?
Just a bit of advice, because we've got a review of standing orders committee on Friday. I just wondered, is that something we should refer it to, because it may or may not be the case. Don't think we're overindulged, but it certainly wouldn't come out on Friday. But actually, maybe I'll be able to mention it as an item of business. Could refer it from this committee, but certainly food for thought, Chairman.
Take that into consideration. All right, so everybody happy with the recommendation so far? Thank you. Members, it's nearly 12:30. Do you want to break for lunch? Yeah? Okay, move on. All right. Report 15 has been taken, deferred until full council. Report 16 is the Bikes to Go project update, and this is a report by the Director of Economy and Environment. This report contains a Bike to Go project update. This project was originally funded as part of the Smarter Choices, Smarter Places Go Smart Dumfries project, total value of 5.4 million. This was a joint West Strands Council bid with local match funding of 2.6 million. The report includes the Bike to Go initial options analysis, Appendix 1, and the infrastructure audit, Appendix 2. Members are being asked to reflect on the project and agree the next steps. Douglas Kirkpatrick will take any questions on the report. Members? Okay, there's no. Can we go to the recommend? Sorry, Patsy.
Why are we keeping them?
Douglas, why are we keeping them?
Chair, thank you. They're our assets. We own them. They are being stored at the moment. It's we may as well use them to get people active. And I think the recommendations that Cycling Dumfries, I'd like to thank Cycling Dumfries very much for the work they put into this. They know about Dumfries, they know about bikes, they know certainly more about active travel than I do. And therefore, I think if we have assets, we may as well use them. The more we get people active, the more benefits to the whole of society. And I think the actions are quite...
Patsy.
Well, I would say that when you've got an asset that's perhaps not being utilised as well as it might be, it's time to bring it to a close and sell that asset and bring it back into the council coffers. Because if you have these bikes going out to charity things like Macmillan Move and all the rest of it, we are responsible, therefore, I would imagine, for the upkeep, maintenance. Anybody falls off and there's an insurance claim, were the brakes working, was the chain on properly, blah, 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 blah. I just wonder, I don't think we're very good at doing this, and I think we should cut our losses.
Chair, thank you again. Yes, the proposal is to run a 3-month trial to see how that works. The NHS have confirmed they have proper insurance. They have a mechanic there available to run this trial with Move More Macmillan. I think once we've got the outcomes of that, and again, we're getting that assessed by the NHS, is that we then look to see if we can take that forward or not. So I think that after that 3-month trial, we'll be in a position to answer some of the concerns you have.
Malcolm.
With the involvement with the NHS and your 3-month trial, is that not really slightly irrelevant given that the hospital's going to be moving?
Yeah, this is for the Move More Macmillan, and the bikes will be used at 2 sites in Dumfries and Stranraer. It's for people who are recovering from cancer, so it's not actually related to the site itself or getting travel to and from the hospital. It's to actually get people more active as part of their recovery.
So is that not a healthcare issue rather than a council issue? I mean, we're going to spend an awful lot of time in this meeting, I think, discussing storage. It seems to be storage of unused assets seems to be a bit of an issue across the board. But I must admit, I tend to agree with Patsy. I don't think there's demand for it, and I think we should possibly look at binning it.
I'll try and move this on, Patsy. You putting that forward as a motion to do away with this scheme altogether?
Yes, I'm quite
And are you
happy.
going to second that, Malcolm? Well, I'm going to put a motion forward that we go with the recommendations on this. This is about active travel at the end of the day. It's about improving health. It's about trying to get people out a bit longer. It's about trying to get people who are, after suffering cancer, try to get them improving their health side of things. So I'm going to put an amendment in that we go with the recommendations on this.
So just to get the word in, they've got a motion put forward by Councillor Gilroy, seconded by Councillor Johnston, and that is to scrap the bike scheme altogether.
I would put it in a slightly different tone. I think that the time for these bikes is no longer necessary. We could offload them to the National Health Service. I have no problem with that, but I do not think that we as a council should be storing and maintaining bikes that are not our responsibility.
Perhaps
so you can proceed that ever.
Can we just get clearance on the maintenance?
Certainly, as part of this trial, we are not maintaining the bikes, they are being stored, and
Well, then give them away. We do not need to have them.
The
Amendment.
Amendment.
Motion.
Motion. Motion.
Motion. Motion.
Motion.
Motion.
Amendment.
Okay, thank you. Move on to item 17, off-site infrastructure associated with new Dumfries Hospital. There are a number of recommendations in this report, and the provision of the new Dumfries Hospital requires infrastructure adjustments associated with the planning consent, and this report seeks members' approval to proceed with the implementation of the recommended option. At its meeting on 19th of January 2017, this committee agreed that consultation be undertaken with local members and the Community Council, and the results of that consultation brought back to this committee on 9th of March. At the 9th of March 2017 EE&I meeting, members agreed that officers look again at the junction options in conjunction with the NHS, gaining further feedback from the public to evolve the proposals and come back to this committee today with costings and options. It's a very detailed report. However, this is what members of EE&I requested. Now, James MacLeod will take any questions on the report, and John Howell is also in attendance for questions. Members? Right, so everybody agreed with the recommendations? Thank you very much. That was an easy one. Here we go. Okay, now we move on to item 18, which is the Improving Parking in Scotland, a consultation. The purpose of this report is to provide members with the opportunity to consider the Council's response to Transport Scotland's Improving Parking in Scotland consultation. The proposed response is attached to Appendix 2, and John Howell will take any questions on that consultation response. Members? Are we happy to go with the recommendations? Right, well, I'll give you your chance. Go on. Right, okay then. Stephen, Patsy, then Jeff.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. No, I welcome this, and I think it's timely that we have this response back for the consultation. I think the only thing that's always sort of made me raise a question with this is about the cost of decriminalised parking enforcement. And I appreciate that it's very hard to see how it would make economic sense, and this is something that we've been aware of in the area for a while. However, I think that there's often a time when there are other factors beyond economics that, as long as the economic case sits within a certain known cost, there are other benefits potentially to certain things where the cost is actually worth it, because there's a wider well-being or a wider standard that can be adhered to and kept and managed. So I think that would be my only comment rather than anything else, but I wouldn't want to die in a ditch over sort of making some kind of representation about it. But there is clearly a focus purely on the economic rather than the wider benefit, and I think that's maybe something that we should consider more widely in future. Thank you.
Alistair, you want to share anything on that?
Yes, there's no doubt it's a point well made, but the fact is that we would be in deficit if each year if we introduce decriminalisation, and therefore it's a budget issue and it's a budget pressure. But we can have a further discussion as time goes on about that. But at the moment, I certainly as Director would not recommend decriminalisation.
Just a quick response. No, I fully appreciate that and understand the rationale for that, but I think, you know, the council isn't a good example of a profit-making business in anybody's book, and I think that there are certain things that is worth spending money on every year to improve our environment, if you like, in the widest sense, and sometimes there can be a case made on that basis, and I think that's really what the point I was trying to make. Thank you.
Point made. Patsy?
Yes, it's just, I'm thinking about Gatehouse in particular. I don't know, Mr. Howell's very familiar with sort of Catherine Street and Birkwhistle Street, whereby I would hate to see a blanket ruling come in about parking, because if, to be perfectly honest, if the cars didn't park part of the time on the pavement, there would be absolutely no way you'd get any cars down that road. I mean, it's just too narrow, and we have to be careful that we don't create problems for people, because there isn't a car park, there's nowhere to park the cars except for where they are, and if they don't park them the way they are, there's absolutely no way, A, you can get down with another car, or B, with a fire engine or an ambulance or anything else. So I just hope that we don't get over enthusiastic about this and think that we do a blanket ban on car parking in on pavements and things? Because I think there are exceptions and they have to be realised and they have to be.
John, do you want to come on?
Thanks, Chair. Yes, I think the paper from the Scottish Government and the questions basically and the responses does give an opportunity for exemptions but I think the presumption would be that parking on footways is illegal, and then you could actually have exemptions for the sort of circumstances that you're describing.
Jeff?
Yeah, my point was relating to that as well. Presumably you have to have signage indicating that you are allowed to park on the pavement in particular areas rather than just relying upon people knowing it's permitted in those areas.
And that wouldn't be including the £200,000 cost either.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just to confirm that that would be the case, that the exemption would have to be. It's like the opposite of having the waiting restrictions that we have at the moment. It says you would be able to park at this location.
Richard, then Malcolm.
Yeah, on the question of exemptions, I think it's got to be clear how these exemptions are made in the legislation and make it easier for local authorities to identify exemptions which can be rolled into place right away. So that's the point to make. Otherwise, I'm quite happy with the response.
Okay, thank you, Malcolm.
I think we would appear to be, relying a great deal here on the good offices of Police Scotland to come along and take over the parking.
It's their responsibility anyway.
It is their responsibility, but they've made it quite clear that for them it's not a priority. And locally in Dumfries, I think it's having detrimental effect on footfall in the high street and a lot of the shops. And I think as Stephen said, there's a wider issue that we need to look at for the economy as a whole.
You want to answer that?
Yeah, there's no doubt that on-street parking is criminal. That's the legislation. Therefore, a criminal offence, and it's very much for the police to deal with that. And they've made it quite clear that it's not a resource priority, although there is no doubt they do send out officers now and again to address the issue. If it's obstruction, then it's something that would cause a danger. They deal with it immediately, and they've assured us of that. I'm working with the local commander, Gary Ritchie, to look to see if we can have a joint approach, to see if we can work on this in partnership. And we're looking at a number of ideas. But as it stands at the moment, we've made it very clear in our response that this council does not have decriminalisation, and there's no proposals to do that. Now, if we have to consider that as we go forward, we certainly will, if that's members' view. But up until now, that has not been the case.
Graham?
Thanks, Chair. Who rules in these exemptions that John has talked about? Is it the police? Is it the community council? Is it local members? How do you go about getting an exemption if a street is too narrow or whatever?
John?
I think first of all we have to have the legislation in place, but assuming that came into effect, that essentially the answer to question 3 we've suggested that by default parking on a footway, etc., is the offence, and then the subject to appropriate specific exemptions. So I think that would be on the same basis that we deal with requests for waiting restrictions, that it would be on a kind of case-by-case basis, and issues brought forward. Councillor Gilroy's identified a specific location. I'm sure there's others. Obviously, I can't know every road within Dumfries and Galloway. I think it would be on that kind of case-by-case basis, and perhaps it's whether are there other solutions, or is it just it's custom and habit that people do that at the moment, and I see places where this happens and there's no real justification for it whatsoever. There's ample road width. It's just what people want to do at the moment. So I think but equally there might be other locations where narrow road, no off-street parking, but you just have to deal with it on a case-by-case basis if the legislation was in place.
Malcolm, you had to come back and then Jim.
Yeah, I just wanted to come back and ask, if there is going to be an element of partnership with the police, what form that partnership would take, and if that partnership would result in us incurring a cost.
Alistair, you mentioned it.
Yeah, the ideas that we're looking at, I don't want to make public at the moment, because we haven't got the detail, and there are legal aspects to it, and obviously it involves the Procurator Fiscal ultimately, and there's no cost to the council.
Jim?
Thanks, Chair. Presumably, if we have exemptions, this requires additional signage, and the signage itself could prove to be quite expensive.
I think I said that before. Yeah. John?
Until such time as we have a form of legislation in place, how that operates is obviously just frankly guesswork at the moment. In regard to waiting restrictions, no waiting at a time, that no longer requires signs. You actually just need the road markings to indicate that. So there might be ways of dealing with it, but I would have thought the number of locations we have is relatively limited. But to be honest, it's really guesswork at the moment. I'm sorry.
Pat?
I'm getting a certain feeling that people are not absolutely thrilled with this, and I'm just wondering if we have to do it. I mean, can we not just opt out of this consultation?
It's just a consultation at the end of the day, and we are, here on behalf of the public in Dumfries and Galloway, and we have a consultation responsibility, I think, to respond to any consultation that the Scottish Government says. And I think it's important that we've had taken that time out to do the response and move forward that way. Somebody have their hand up at the back, Jim.
Just to say, Chair, we've got to bear in mind that this is in the interest of the protection of the public, women with children, perambulators, or whatever you want to call it, folk with invalid vehicles that can't go along the pavement because somebody has decided to put their car on the pavement to protect it from damage. It's getting wrong, it's getting out of hand, and something needs to be done. Otherwise, we'll finish up when the vehicles, when the primary users of footways and the public and the wains with bikes walking in the road. That's going to happen unless someone's dealt with. And how we deal with other things like exemptions, etc., that would happen in the fullness of time, I'm absolutely sure.
Is it members' view you want us to strengthen what we're saying about parking issues on paths? Right. So, John, can you take that away and taking in the suggestions that were mentioned earlier?
Sorry, Chair, I think you're assuming things here. I absolutely do not agree with that.
Well, I just asked the question there, Patsy, and
Yeah,
that's your response at the moment. Right, that's fine. So I'm not assuming anything. I was asking the question.
Yeah, well, I think we ought to have a muted response to this consultation, and I don't think it's as big a problem as everybody seems to think it is. We have got more problems. We're going to create more problems than you're going to solve.
Jim.
I'll put a motion forward if necessary, because vehicles should be in the roadway. That's what they pay excise duty for. They don't pay it to run on the pavement.
That's seconded? No. We've got one way of taking it forward. Is either I'm going to suggest we go with the recommendation and respond as Appendix 2, and it's the Council submission to Transport Scotland. Anybody? Matt? John?
Second that.
Okay. Any others? Going with the recommendation in. Thank you very much. Okay, on the report number 19, this is the source separated waste collection system proposal for continued storage of containers. To seek members' agreement to the continued use of Hangar 1, the Brown Brothers facility for continued storage of the recycling containers required for the source separated waste collection system. James McLeod will take any questions on the report. Director, have you got anything to add to that report?
Nothing to add, Chair, thank you.
Members? Stephen and then Ian.
Well, a couple of things occurred to me when I was reading this, one of which was obviously we're in a position where we're requiring storage, but I recall, I think it was in July last year, there was going to be a report, or at least communication with the public in Wigtonshire in terms of what was then to be agreed in terms of what was going to change in terms of the rollout of the waste collection service, and I'm informed that that's not happened yet, so I'm just it'd be helpful to get an update on that. Obviously there's a need for storage outlined here, it seems to suggest that there's a 1-year payout for 50,000 for a 12-month lease, which is a kind of fixed one-off deal. Given the timescales that we've been operating with this and the probably likely extended timescales in terms of getting a full resolution to the widest rollout, are we better maybe to look at a 1-year deal with a 3-year option or something like that, so we're not sort of stuck with a 50k thing for the first year and then we still need it for year 2 and 3 and then the price doubles? Do you know what I mean? So what have we looked at to ensure that if there is a risk that it's going to go beyond that, we're not getting, you know, first year half price, second year you're paying the full whack type of deal?
James?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Thompson. I'll pick up on the second point. The original agreement, as you can see from the text, was considerably more, and in fact, in last year, it was close to 80,000 that we spent on the annual storage of the containers at the Brown Brothers Hangar 1. Our aim for this year is obviously to look over the next 12 months as to how we would roll out the service and therefore not require the storage of the containers or look to other opportunities in that regard. At the moment, our negotiations with Brown Brothers haven't extended beyond this offer, which was from them to us, to reduce the amount that we've got storage. So the original 80,000 was reduced by them to 50,000 this year.
Stephen, you want to come back?
Yeah, I mean, but that's exactly the question. So we've got a 1-year deal on offer, but I think the risk with this rollout has been that, you know, I mean, originally we would have had waste recycling new service in Annandale and Eskdale by now had it all rolled out according to plan when it was first conceived. And I think that the risk of additional timescales might then incur a future less favourable deal for another 12 months.
Stephen, can I ask the director to come in on this particular one? Because this is all part of the PFI contract, and I just want to make sure that we're doing the right thing here.
Yeah, just for clarity, the delay in rolling out the rest of the scheme across the whole region isn't because of the problems we had with the rollout in Whitesands. It's to do with the fact that we need to vary the waste PFI contract before we roll out any more changes to our collection system, or if we don't, we would be in breach of that contract. So it's the negotiations in the PFI contract that are holding up the whole process. The inflexibility that we're experiencing in these negotiations is the ultimate issue in rolling it out across the rest of the region. Although, in the background, we did have issues to start with in Whitesands, and they're being addressed, and members are due a paper back on that before we roll it out again across the rest of the region, subject to us being able to vary the waste PFI contract. Now, we've heard earlier today that there is a report to come to members September, October time about the PFI contract, where we'll be advising members on where we are and what success we've had in renegotiating to allow the rest of the process to continue.
Plus also as part of the induction, we've asked for that PFI contract for members' awareness. I've got Ian first, then Anne. Right.
Which related to about the community being informed, as was mentioned in the EEI committee in July 2016, and I understand that there hasn't been that rollout in terms of information about the change to the service. So obviously we're getting the benefit of member inductions and information and all the rest of it, but the wider public who week to week, etc., actually rely on the service and knowing about it, I think that's maybe probably more critical to them. So it's really just to get an understanding of when that information is being relayed to the public.
Yeah. What you feel?
Is this, sorry, Councillor Tomlinson, is this with reference to the rollout, the change in rollout in the Wigton area from the 4 routes in Newton Stewart to across the whole of the Wigton area? Yeah.
Just to follow on that, Councillor Thompson, just to take a step back, there was a report to EEI committee on the 1st of July last year, which there was an agreement to roll out the optimised trial for the recycling process within the remainder of Wigton. At that particular time, and very shortly after that, the council reshaping process was affected by the management levels were affected at that particular time, where there was managers that were already dealing with waste and recycling that retired, moved to different directorates. So there was an inherent delay built in by the time that restructure took place. But the situation at the moment is that we are hopeful that there will be a need for a communication strategy that will be the end of the summer, and with a view that the optimised trial that is already in place in part of Wigton will be in place for the remainder of Wigton by early autumn.
And that communication will go out to the public,
Yes.
so that they know. Right, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chairman. I'm trying to think what's the best way to convey how I feel about it in regards to this particular one. Got a lot of press and media attention for this last week. Our group got contacted a considerable amount. Seems a simple, silly wee thing, but 340k is what they were telling us was spent on this, collecting storing a load of bins, and what does that look like, the public perception? But I think if I rewind right back, so I'll be as fair as I can when I'm making these comments here, I was sitting with your sitting chair when we made this decision, so I'll take a degree of responsibility in regards to that. We thought it would be rolled out within a year at that moment in time. Anyways, it hasn't achieved that. There was grant funding for Scottish Government that we were successful in getting, and we bought the bins, balers, so on and so forth. So we decided to store them on a temporary basis, which was 4 years, 5 years on now, 6 years. No, what is it? 4 or 5 years on now, whatever it may be now. We're on, and we're at a completely different place now. But this isn't a sustainable way forward. What we're looking at here, we have to look at somebody. I don't believe that what the comments he's making, I think they're genuine what he's making, but to think in a 2 or 3 year option and is not an option for us. We need to have this bottomed out within a year if we go forward and progress it. And as far as the recommendations are saying here today, so I need to understand as a member what this hangar is, where it is, how big it is, the contents, how much volume have we actually got, what we're looking at. I need to understand across our own buildings, is there actually an opportunity or not? We're saying it's been rolled out, but is there an option to actually say all our containers for our recycling? Is that to say, okay, we've done it in Wigtonshire, can we roll that out across the rest of the region until such? We know this policy is coming in at some point. One of the political reasons, as well as the legal complications, is that it's nearly an extra £500,000 to supply a similar service in Wigtonshire in that one area to what it is in compared to the other 3 districts across the region. So that's potentially another £2 million worth of revenue burden on top of the council if we just implement this right now. But we've got all the legal complications going on in the background. I need to understand as a member of the council what a sustainable way forward is. Like going back to how much room is there in that hangar? Do we need that whole hangar? Have we got the room to store the baler maybe and such like in our own facilities, our own buildings? Stapleton Road's been rolled out in Annan. But if it went on for 3 years, is it worth putting another extra money into that? But ultimately, can we actually say to our residents in Dumfries and Galloway, listen, we're spending £50,000 on storage, what we could be putting into potholes, so on and so forth. We'd like to release these to the residents in Dumfries and Galloway, and it will be implemented at some point in the future. It's for them to store them until such time as our policy is implemented. We know it's going to happen, or do we rule that out? But there's more here that needs to be discussed and understood. Maybe it'll be as part of induction. We need to make a clear decision here today. But I feel as a member, I could only, as the public perception towards me, I could only be criticised as a member of the council. Agreeing going forward, what options have we got? How do we actually deal with this situation? But it's a difficult, £50,000 a small amount of money for the council, but it's the perception that's out there. The media, international media, or the national media, I should say, is picking up on this. So we really have to bottom this out today, finish it and move on.
Well, I would agree there's a lot of interest in it, and I got a few phone calls myself on this particular one. And I'm glad you realised it was your fault that we're in this position, this place now. Anyway, because at the time, the E&I committee, members of my group were actually away to a funeral when that then administration made the decision. We told you then there was going to be some issues here. It's taken a lot longer than it should have taken to get sorted out, and there's no, well, let me finish, Ian, all right? Let me finish. So I'm going to move on. Have we checked for other areas within the council? Director, what's the situation with that side of things?
There is no doubt that this is not sustainable. And we somehow have to break the logjam. And that logjam is associated with our negotiations on the waste purified contract to give us a clear field to go forward and implement our waste strategy as members have agreed. And the report back to members September time hopefully will give members that guidance on how we break that logjam and where we are with the negotiations. We need to store these receptacles. There are 300,000 of them. That is why we need the hangar. We need to make a decision today so we can close the legal deal so that our investment and our asset is safe until we're able to go forward and implement the collection system. It is a complex situation. I can understand members' frustration. Myself and my officers are equally frustrated. We're doing our very best to break that logjam, and we'll come back and advise groups separately and advise members of the committee and how that might proceed.
Andrew?
There's just one area I was wondering if you've explored, and that is if we do go down the route of leasing it for 3 years, are we able to sublet the areas as and when we start to vacate it? Or what's the position with that?
It's only for a year, Andrew, this one. Yeah. Okay. Good. Graham?
Thanks, Chair. What are we... The headline here says, source separated waste collection system, proposal for continued storage of containers. You then read down into the script, and 3.1 talks about sorting and baling equipment and vehicles as well as containers. What are we actually, that's my first question, once I get the answer to that, I'll maybe have a second one. What are we actually storing here? Are we storing in this hangar the baling equipment and the vehicles as well as the containers? What are the containers made of? Do they need a hangar?
We are storing generally the containers, and there are balers and other associated equipment like liners for the bins. The vehicles are not stored. The vehicles are in use at our depots, and we are using the vehicles. What's the word I'm looking for? Help me, please. I've had a senior moment. Pardon? We're rotating them. That's the word I'm looking for. We're rotating the vehicles so that they are used periodically, so they keep turning and they keep in operation. The bins are made of plastic material, and therefore being out in the sunshine while we're storing them is an advantage. We've looked very hard at what the council has as assets to store, and we haven't come up with them.
If I could come back, Chair, just to say that I'm in the Wigton area, and the system working in my patch, and I would have to say that my bins are stored outside, and they haven't deteriorated to any extent at all.
John, then I'll come back to you.
It's just in there, when we're having the induction, would there be any possibility we could actually go out and have a look at the hangar to see what is actually stored in there, to see what it's like? Because as I say at the present here, the now, it's 50,000 per annum for the year. I don't think we've got any other option at present than having it. We're being held over. We seem to be being held over a barrel with Brown Brothers by what we're having there, because it seems to be the only facility we've got to get it. But as I say, if they've got to be stored for a year, I don't think we've got another great option other than to go with the recommendation.
Ian, you want to come back?
Just about the recommendations in particular, Chairman, and as far as agreeing to continue lease hangar, one at a cost of £50,000 per annum, that leaves it open-ended. I'd like to close that for a further year, I think, £50,000 for a further year, so that is it. We've been quite clear in our decision making as a council that we're saying this is it, and we will have our inductions. Our group will certainly have a site visit. We'll make sure that's organised, and if that's with the wider council in it, because it lends the time to, that it's handy for us, then absolutely we'll do that. Happy to do that kind of stuff, but this has to be cut off at this point in time, and if we're good, so that we make sure we've got a sustainable way forward, and this public perception that's out there. And go back to the point you made earlier, I was sitting at the chair now, I took on part of that responsibility as part of my comments. That was for a year we made that decision, because we thought it would be implemented and go back to the political and legal complications that have come up, which is led by particularly your own party since then, Chairman.
Yes, Chair. Is there a likelihood the PFI agreement will be bottomed out within the next 12 months?
That's the target, and we're doing our very best to do that. Members have encouraged myself and my team to be hard-nosed about the way forward, and we're doing our very best to get clarity and get an agreement. We have gone to adjudication on our change in law. It's a change of law process to vary the contract. We won that adjudication on what we were proposing, but the problem we have at the moment is the revised costs our contractor has provided. And that's the negotiation we're about to set off and try and bottom out.
There may be changes to the contract in the future depending on what else comes along. You never know, legislation might change, there's things like that, but all that has to be renegotiated as part of the PFI contract. And that's why I think at the members' induction, the PFI contract needs to be understood by members of the E&I committee, and I'm hoping that's going to give you a better understanding of what changes, if they come along, what does that actually mean? What's the, you know, what does the director and his staff have to go through to get that change going forward?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I find it, you know, it's a bit of an open-ended dialogue that you've got here with this PFI agreement, and we don't know whether it's going to be within a year, 2 years, 3 years. Have we got any feeling at all on this?
Well, the target is to do it within the year, obviously. Our target was hopefully to have it sorted before the start of the financial year. That would be absolutely ideal. But again, we haven't managed that. And members are due a report to explain why that is the situation and to explain how we go forward.
Okay, members are going to go to the recommendations. Members are asked to note 2.1, note 2.2, and agree 2.3. For 1 year, Okay. Thank you very much. I have no other business. Thank you very much for your attendance. I believe there is some food. Members? Oh, sorry, members. Just before you go, this will be Ewan Green. So he's not here now, but Ewan Green this will be his last